Today we're making gnocchi with Parmesan foam, and this dish clocks in at 775 calories per portion with 31 grams of proteins, 63 grams of carbs and 43 grams of fat. And to start off, we're going to preheat our oven 180 degrees, and then we're going to simply measure out 300 grams of potatoes. I went a bit higher here, but that works as well. But aim for 300 grams, and then we're going to poke some holes in them. These are very fresh potatoes, so as you can see, there's a lot of water in them. And then we're going to just place them in the oven for roughly 1 hour or until they're very soft. You can also boil your potatoes, but if you do, make sure you boil them with the water slightly below boiling so it doesn't damage the skin as much. And once they're hot, we're simply going to remove them and peel them as soon as possible. I let mine rest on the counter for 2 or 3 minutes just to cool down a little bit, and then we're gonna cut them open and peel them. And we want to peel them as soon as possible because when we're pressing these, we want as much steam to escape as possible once they are pressed, so that they become as dry as possible. And then simply press your potatoes into a bowl. And then we're going to measure out 100 grams of flour, and this recipe is for 2 portions, but as usual there's a link in the description where you can change the number of servings you'd like. And then we're going to take 1 egg yolk. I got 2 here, so I'm using 2, but 1 is sufficient. And then all we need to do is mix that together. Since we're using potatoes, we need a lot of salt. So a big pile of salt in there, add the flours, add the egg yolks. And then we're going to mix this together as much as possible in the bowl. So, once we mix this, pour it out on the counter, and then we're going to knead our dough. We don't need to knead it like a pasta dough, so carefully push this together until you get a nice dough. And since I'm having 2 egg yolks in this dough, it's quite wet. And the gnocchi also tends to stick to your counter, so you're going to need some flour there eventually. Otherwise it will stick. And then we're going to roll our dough out. And I like to use a bench scraper here just to cut it into smaller pieces and make them a bit more easy to use. So sprinkle some flour on our counter, and then we're going to use that to roll our dough into smaller pieces. And just roll those pieces until they're gnocchi size, which is roughly 2 centimeters thick in diameter. And once we have rolled them, we are going to need somewhere to put them once we have made them. So I like to use a wooden cutting board, and you're going to need some flour on that as well, otherwise they will stick. And then all you need to do is cut them with something. I like to use a bench scraper here as well. And if you have a gnocchi board, you can use that to make your gnocchi pattern. And what you want to do is take your thumb and push them until you create a little hole inside, and then simply roll them down. You can also use a fork if you don't have a gnocchi board, or if you think this is too time consuming, you can just use them as they are, which is fine as well. And here they are, and we're gonna do that for all of them, and that looks like that. So once all of our gnocchis are done, we're going to turn our attention to our Parmesan foam, and for that we're going to need 120 grams cheese. It says 60 on the scale, but it's 120 because I needed to reset it at 60, otherwise the scale will turn off. And same amount of cream, so we're going for 120 grams there as well. So to make our foam, we're going to use a siphon. and I'm using one of these. And we're also going to need 2 cartridges. But to start off, we're gonna get a pot and boil some water that we're gonna boil our gnocchi in, or bring some water to boil. And then we're gonna get another pot, and in that pot we're going to pour our cheese and our cream. And we want to make this sort of into a liquid. Once your pasta water is boiling, just salt it and lower the temperature so it's just below boiling. Then you can use it when you are ready. And in with the cream, and then we are going to heat this up slowly. My stove goes to 9 and I'm using 4 here. And what we want is we want this to become a smooth liquid. And that means that we need to be a little bit careful. We don't want to heat it too quick, and we don't want to heat it too much. If you go somewhere above 70 degrees, the cheese will become stringy and it will become a total mess. So heat it slowly, and as you can see, it's really grainy at first. But if you heat this slowly and keep stirring, it's going to become a smooth liquid eventually. And if you're worried about temperature, you can just use an instant thermometer to check what temperature you need to be at. And here you see it actually becomes quite smooth, but we're still at just 50 degrees and you still have some lumps in there. So we're going to go up to roughly high 60s. I like to go for high 60s, but don't go above 70 because then you might have some problems. And once we have our smooth liquid, we need to get this into the siphon. You can do this 2 ways. You can either do put it through fine mesh sieve, which I think is the safe way, or you can do what I do and just pour it in and hope there's no lumps in there and hope for the best. It usually works out fine. If it doesn't, you need to clear the blockages in the siphon, which can be a bit of a hassle. But then again, if you pour it through a fine mesh sieve, it might become too cold and it might take too long, so I'll prefer it this way. And I don't think you're supposed to, but if things get stuck, you can use a cake tester to just clear the obstruction, and that usually works fine. Probably not optimal, but it works. In with the gnocchi. Gnocchi is going to be boiling until they float to the top. Then we're going to add our first batch of gas. Just screw that in, shake it roughly 10 times, and then go for the second. Same thing here, just screw it in until you hear that noise, and then shake it again. And then I'm going to leave this on the counter. You can also put it in a warm bath if you want to make sure to keep this hot. But since we're timing everything quite nicely, our gnocchis have started to float, and that means that they're almost done. So, you can of course put your foam on the bottom, but then I didn't think it would show, so I did it on top instead. And then just pour your gnocchis in 2 bowls on 2 plates. Use your siphon and add your foam. You can be quite scared to handle your siphon for the first time, but it's not really that tricky. So, I hope you try this, and if you do, I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching.